Welcome to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany Werner, licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida. Moments of Clarity's mission is to educate and end the stigma on mental health through the inspirational stories of our exceptional guests. You can join in the show by calling Tiffany toll-free at 866-826-1340 or on Facebook and Twitter at MOC with Tiffany. Now, here's Tiffany Werner.
Hi, and thanks for listening. This is Moments of Clarity. I'm Tiffany Werner. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I'm your host. And today we're going to be talking about something that is worldwide. It affects everyone, and it's one of the hardest things to fight. It's killing people every day, and a lot of people don't know how to get out of it. And what I'm talking about is substance abuse, addiction, and hopefully at the end, recovery. And my guest today, he hosts up and produces a podcast called The Path to Authenticity. And he's been a substance abuse counselor for over 20 years, working with people and families that are affected by addiction. And he helps young men and women navigate the terrain between early stages of substance and abstinence and long-term recovery. And I want to welcome to Moments of Clarity, Tom Gentry. Hey, Tom.
Hey, thank you.
So,
can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah.
All right, so great. Let's start in the beginning, where you found your passion for recovery and how you ended up where you are.
Wow. Well, I'm like a lot of people who end up working in this world of substance abuse treatment and recovery. I got sober at 23. I'm the youngest of 8, come from a big family, and I had an older sister who kind of led the way for me and got sober. And a year after that, she just kind of wasn't going to have it any other way than to see her little brother survive. So she kind of she did everything she possibly could to help me, and I was really grateful to have a family member who was in recovery at the time. She passed a few years ago, but, she was kind of my angel.
When was the time that you felt like you hit rock bottom and that you needed help?
Well, I don't think I have never felt anything worse than not being able to stop drinking. That was probably, once you get to a point where you really don't want to be doing it anymore, but you can't stop yourself, that's pretty frightening.
Right.
And I would say that was my rock bottom. I remember, I started drinking pretty young. I don't even really know how young I was when I started to drink. But by the time I was in high school, I was drinking consistently. And usually getting drunk every time I did. And by the time I was out of high school, it was almost every night. And I remember being afraid to turn 21 because I knew once I really had unfettered access to alcohol, all bets were off.
Yeah, it's scary to know that when you have actually freedom to do something, it's worse.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it. Most young people, they probably really look forward to turning 21 and being able to go out and explore and all that stuff. By the time I got there, I knew it was going to be bad news.
What do you think is the projected you to want to start drinking so young?
Well, I grew up in a family where there was a lot of drinking, especially the men in my world. That's kind of what they did for fun. A lot of them still what they kind of do to have fun. So, I had this desire, like all little boys do, to be connected to the grown men in their lives, and I wanted to feel closer to those people who I loved. And for me, kind of the unspoken message that I got is the way I was going to achieve that was by drinking.
So it was more of a social thing that you were just used to, or you wanted to be accepted, kind of peer pressure?
I wouldn't say it was peer pressure. I think it was more about belonging. I wanted to feel like I belonged among them. And, when I was a little boy, it was kind of, go play, go. And every little boy wants to be a man. He wants to feel a part of with the men in his life. And that's what they did. And, it was fun. They had fun. There was a lot of laughing. They all played cards. I mean, it just looked like the life to me. It's what I really wanted to do. I just really wanted to be a part of it. So I wouldn't say it's as much pressure as just, wanting to belong, wanting to feel like I belonged more than I did. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you were set up for failure from the start with a bunch of role models that kind of let loose. And that's what you saw.
Well, I think that's definitely one way to look at it. And that's a valid point. And over the years in my recovery, I'd say that's one of the reasons I've come to forgive myself for some of the mistakes that I've made, because it kind of was a setup. It would have been miraculous for anything to happen besides me becoming an alcoholic. It would have just been, nearly impossible for that to not happen, I think, in hindsight. I didn't, like you hear in recovery, nobody ever aspires to be an alcoholic or a drug addict. That's not what I wanted. I just wanted to have a normal life. So, it wasn't like, I just decided, well, I'm going to make a lot of bad decisions. No, it's something that happened to me. Not that I didn't have a role in it. Not that I wasn't responsible, or I'm not responsible for my past or anything like that, but I certainly didn't choose it.
Well, Tom, can you speak into your mic a little bit more?
Sure.
It's hard
I'm
to hear
sorry.
you.
Is that better?
Yeah. It's a little bit better. Yeah, a lot better, actually. So, when did you decide to start listening to your family, like with your sister? What happened?
Well, what happened? What happened is that I, back when I was a young adult, I was working as a carpenter, and I had this job where I was traveling, installing hardwood floors. We had this big job in Chicago and ran out of material, so I had a couple weeks where I was at home, not working, waiting on materials to arrive at this job from Canada. And I pretty much stayed drunk the entire time. And at the time, I still lived with my parents. I just kind of was hiding in my bedroom, only coming out when no one is around to go get more alcohol or go to the bathroom or whatever. And, sooner or later, they started to try to intervene. And, it was a pretty dramatic last day of my drinking, which was actually will be 23 years ago tomorrow.
23 years in recovery.
But, yeah. So, a sister, I have 5 sisters. One of them who still live there kept trying to kind of get me to come to and, get moving. And I just kept kind of playing possum, pretending like I was passed out or whatever. I know this sounds crazy.
Nothing sounds crazy on this show.
Yeah, but I kept pretending not to come to, and several times that day she called an ambulance for me, and these paramedics would show up in my bedroom and say, "Are you okay? Do you want to go to the hospital?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm fine. No, I don't want to go." So, they wouldn't take me without my consent. And finally, and I learned all this probably a year later. I mean, I was blacked out, but I vaguely remember them coming one of the times. But eventually I conceded and went to the hospital. And, one of the stories that I like to tell about this is that, going back into childhood, elementary school, I was a pretty good student. And where I grew up in Indiana, there was kind of a track for gifted students where they kind of had advanced classes, and I was in some of those, and I remember in third or fourth grade, the teacher going around the room one day and asking us all what we wanted to be when we grew up. And vividly, I remember this little girl, Angie Lee, raising her hand and saying, "I'm going to be a doctor." And so I end up getting taken to this emergency room at 23 years old. And lo and behold, there's Angie Lee doing her residency, looking down at me saying, "Tom, what are you doing with your life?" And, that was like one of those moments. That was a turning point for me. I knew something bigger was happening in that moment. She definitely was an angel who appeared in front of me. And, it was really, it was just what I needed at the time. She gave me a lot of love and attention, and just kind of comforted me. And, but I refused to stay in that hospital. So, the medical staff there told my parents, don't take him home. At that point, I had blown a 3.9 about an hour and a half after my last drink, which is not really far from legally dead.
It's really high.
It is really, really high. I've only heard of one or two people ever getting a higher blood alcohol content than that. But anyway, I wouldn't stay. So I remember it was back, it was 96. Not everybody had cell phones back then. So I remember going into the parking lot of this hospital and getting in the back seat of my mom and dad's car, and they got in, and my dad started the car and just kind of looked at my mom, and he got out, and he went back inside the hospital, and he called the police.
Wow.
And they pulled up next to my dad's car and told me to get out, and they handcuffed me, and they arrested me for public intoxication. And by that time, I had already spoken to someone at a facility down here in West Palm Beach who I am still friends with, a guy named Alan Schwartz, who took that phone call and was very, very kind to me and tolerant of the way I treated him over the phone. I wasn't, if anyone's ever worked in admissions at a substance abuse treatment facility, that takes a lot of patience and tolerance because
I've worked in a substance abuse facility too.
Yeah, people can get pretty abusive over the phone, and I did with Alan, but he listened, and he ended up getting me there. So I spent the night in jail, which kind of isn't my thing, I'm not the only times I've ever been arrested was for public intoxication. Jail, nobody likes jail, but I definitely don't feel like I'm someone who belongs in that kind of setting. But the next morning, they just, my family, they just wanted me to get some help. And the night before, while they had me at this hospital, my sister lives down here in Florida, and she had gone to this facility in West Palm Beach and was trying to help me get in there. And so that night at the hospital, I kept saying, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. I need to leave. I want to go to Florida. And by the time the morning rolled around and I got my phone call from the jail cell, I called my dad at about 7 o'clock in the morning and said, "Listen, I don't care where I go, but I need help." And, that's when I really let go. And so that was maybe 7 a.m. By noon, I was out of jail. By 2:30 in the afternoon, I was on a flight. And I've been here in Florida living and working and in recovery ever since.
Wow.
And I'll tell you, one of my sisters said to me, yes, but something that I think is really important for people to understand about substance abuse treatment. I think one of the things that we see in the media is we see a lot of examples of people not, quote unquote, succeeding. Before, one of my sisters drove my mom and I to the airport. My mom flew down here with me to make sure I'd make it, which happens all the time. But the last thing she said to me was, "You go there and do what the people